Greetings, I'm Richard Roda, and today is December 20th, 2018. This interview is part of the Tennessee Board of Regents Oral History Project, and we're here today on the campus of Tennessee Tech University, and our guest this morning is the president of the university, Dr. Phil Oldham. Thanks for being
Rich.
here, Phil.
Good to have you on campus.
Thank you. So if we could begin, please, tell us about yourself,
Sure.
background, and
Glad
how
to.
you got here.
Well, I'm actually in my 7th year as president at Tennessee Tech now. I'm a native of Tennessee. I grew up in West Tennessee, just south of Jackson, Chester County. Left the state for graduate school, received a PhD in chemistry from Texas A&M, taught for over 20 years at Mississippi State University in chemistry. Moved back to Tennessee in 2007 as the provost at UT Chattanooga. Had a great 5 years in Chattanooga at UTC, and then came to Tennessee Tech as president in 2012, and have really enjoyed this experience.
Well, very good. Yeah. And so one of the things I want to ask you about, but not right now, so you are one of the few in Tennessee higher education that has been both in a leadership position, both the UT system and the Board of Regents,
That's
and
true.
of course now independent. So in the back of your mind, be thinking
Absolutely.
about that. So, you came to Tennessee to go to, back to Tennessee, UT Chattanooga, and you were part of a group from Mississippi State. Is that correct?
No, actually wasn't. There was a migration of some talent from Mississippi State. A group in the Sim Center, the computational simulation group from Mississippi State, had moved to UTC probably about 2 years before I arrived.
Okay.
That was really separate, just sort of a interesting coincidence. But yeah, I knew most of those guys. Yeah.
But that was part of that Center of Excellence initiative.
It is correct.
That started
That's right.
back, and that was one of the more successful of the centers, if I remember correctly.
I think so. Absolutely.
Right.
A very talented group of guys. Yeah.
Very good. Okay, so let's talk about when you came to Tennessee Tech at that time. So it was 2012. Right. And anything in particular about Tech or what was going on at the time that attracted you?
Well, Tennessee Tech is one of those institutions that was always sort of interest to me. Partly a family relationship. My dad had actually completed his bachelor's degree here back in the 1950s. He was working nearby, and it was convenient for him to complete his 4-year degree while he was in the area. I had not really had any other connection to Tennessee Tech other than that, but I certainly knew of the reputation, and my background in chemistry sort of lended itself by academic discipline to the strengths of Tennessee Tech, being a technological university with strengths in science and engineering. And so there were some occasional encounters over the years professionally with faculty and staff from Tennessee Tech. Of course, I always had an affinity to come back to Tennessee, and this is one of those institutions that seemed like it might be a good fit. The timing seemed right in 2012, both for me personally, professionally, and for Tennessee Tech. I mean, it was, and I think it still is, an institution that has an enormous amount of yet unrealized potential, and so that was very attractive to me, to be part of buildings, taking something that was already outstanding and maybe beginning to look aspirationally at even a higher level of attainment. And so yeah, that's really what attracted me.
Yeah. Well, again, this is jumping ahead, but just being around campus this morning and seeing the construction and all the good things going on, so you've...
Yeah, we've got a lot going on. It is exciting, and it's more than just about campus development. It's really about the students, and I think that's the great thing about Tennessee Tech, and that's been true throughout its 100+ year history now. It's all about students and student success, student performance, the creation of added value for students, many of which are, or at least over the history, have been first-generation college students, and for them to then be able to aspire to go off and do things way beyond their experience growing up that they would have ever dreamed of. That's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, and I'll say this about Tennessee Tech traditionally, but continuing, you know, completion rates, success, low graduation with lower student debt. So it's
a great value proposition, and that's as you know, Rich, in today's world of higher education, that's a tremendous place to be in this marketplace, because you know, the questions surround constantly about, is a college degree really worth it? Because it's an investment. It's a significant investment for students and families. And that's an investment that needs to pay off. And that's a great thing about Tennessee Tech. And you know, we're not alone in that. But I think Tennessee Tech really has a great position in the marketplace of higher education, because it is a great value for that investment dollar.
Sure. Yeah. So back when you, one of the things that's changed over time in the Board of Regents system has been the presidential search and selection process.
Correct.
So if you could give kind of an account from your perspective, sure, what that was like.
Well, it's a meat grinder. I mean, it's a difficult process, and it's very public, and so particularly for candidates that are already in relatively high-profile positions, and generally that's the kind of candidate you want to attract to these roles. They can feel very exposed and pretty vulnerable over that time period. So, you know, I think my experience with the search here at Tennessee Tech was consistent with that. You know, it's relatively quiet for a good bit of the process, but then particularly in the last month or so, it gets extremely public, and so you're dealing with a lot of local questions and anxieties with the institution or a particular position you have currently, as well as trying to negotiate all the questions and concerns of you know, in my case here at Tennessee Tech, and what their expectations would be for the next president. So it's an interesting process in a lot of ways, and you know, from a public perspective, I would say that it's appropriate. I mean, this is an important decision, obviously, and everybody needs to feel like everything's being considered appropriately and as transparent as possible. But from the candidate's perspective, it's difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good. Right. And you succeeded, so.
Yeah,
I made it worthwhile.
Yeah, it's you know, when you think about just the pure statistical odds of going through a selection process like that, you think, I'm not sure anybody survives that, but somehow somebody does, and I was fortunate enough to be the one here.
Hadn't thought of it, but it's kind of like professional sports. So
It is, yeah.
Statistically.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you've been in the Board of Regents system. Of course, you're not now, but you were. And were there any, given your experience with the UT system,
Sure.
were there any differences as far as from a campus leadership perspective?
Sure. You know, and obviously being a provost on a campus in the UT system is not quite equivalent to being a president in the TBR system, but I was pretty involved in system level activities in the UT system while I was there, and of course it's a smaller system, and so there's some different dynamics that, I mean, 5 campuses as opposed to 40 some odd campuses at the time in TBR. And so you do tend to get to know everybody else in the system a little bit easier, and you know, and you know who to talk to and all of that. So you know, the 2 big takeaways, I guess, for me, the differences, sort of pros and cons. The UT system, at that time at least, tended to be a little more top-heavy in terms of how they manage the campuses. Individual campuses in the UT system were not allowed too much autonomy, and so sometimes that felt a little bit restrictive at the campus level. And I'm just speaking for myself in that
Sure.
regard. I can't, you know, that was, and of course Chattanooga had an interesting relationship and history in the UT system, in that the University of Chattanooga had been a private university for about 80 years before it was incorporated into the UT system. So it went from a relatively small, faith-based, sort of liberal arts private campus, and then overnight became part of a major public land grant system. That's a big shift, and so there's still a lot of remnants of that dynamic that plays out on that campus in that way. And so autonomy was we were probably pretty sensitive to the autonomy question in Chattanooga, but that's sort of the sense I got. On the more positive side, however, the UT system and UT governance structure was very helpful when it came to advocacy for the UT system, all its campuses, and the brand identity of the University of Tennessee as a system, and that should not be understated. That's of tremendous value, and I bring that up because the moving in the TBR system, it was almost a mirror image of those two factors. Partly probably because the TBR system was so large and all ruled by one board. It was very difficult for board or the senior staff at the system level to really give a lot of attention to any one campus for any length of time. And so autonomy was actually, I don't know if it was by design, but I think most of at least the university campuses in the TBR system had a much better opportunity for autonomy than the campuses in the UT system. On the other hand, advocacy was, in terms of the system as a whole and the individual campuses in the TBR system, was almost non-existent.
Fragmented.
There was very fragmented. Many of the regents on the board, obviously you couldn't have an alumnus from every campus on the board, and so I'm not even sure that all of the regents at various times were alumni of any of the campuses in the system. And so there was a lack of advocacy and sometimes a lack of as much focus and direction for the system as a whole. Because and that's not a criticism. It's just,
No,
I think it's
reality.
I think it's just reality. It's a very large, diverse group of institutions. You know, everything from a College of Applied Technology to a major university, and so you know the issues and the concerns by all those different campuses and different constituencies was just too broad.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
So, again, the timing of your coming to Tech coincided with implementing a major new set of legislation. The Complete College Tennessee Act had really gone into effect, but was being implemented early stages, and then the Drive to 55 came on right on the top of that. So big statewide initiatives. Again, any comments on the impact and how that?
Well, in fact, it's interesting because the Complete College Tennessee Act of 2010, actually I got fairly involved in that while I was still at UTC. And one aspect of the Complete College Tennessee Act was to improve fluidity for student migration around the state. So articulation of coursework and so that students weren't losing credits or losing time and financial resources if they went from one campus to another. And we know, as you're aware from your days at THEC, students do transfer fairly frequently around the state, and so it was not in anybody's best interest for students to lose time and resources through that inefficiency of transfer. So I was actually tasked while I was still in the UT system to be the lead individual on behalf of the UT system to help negotiate a lot of those transfer pathways. And that was a great experience. It actually gave me some insight into how the Tennessee Board of Regents functioned, and particularly with the community colleges, and what those relationships were like. And it was actually a very helpful experience for me in a lot of ways. So I got to see that. And I think that's along with the transfer pathways and the change in the funding model for Tennessee institutions, those were sort of the two big takeaways out of the Complete College Tennessee Act, and they were, both of which were very transformative, and I think that's been clearly demonstrable in the last few years. That how we fund higher education in Tennessee, and once we went to a performance-based, a truly performance-based model, and where the state was clearly articulating, here's what's important for us, here's what we want to pay for, and that's student progress, student graduations, student success. It fundamentally changed the conversations, I think, on every campus in the state, and it ultimately changed cultures on those campuses, which is not easy to do, and without a real monetary incentive, I don't know that would have ever happened. So I think on every campus you see much improved graduation rates, better retention rates of students, much more attention to student success than ever before. That's a significant change. Now, as you move into Tennessee Promise, the Drive to 55 with Governor Haslam, it just sort of took all of that and sort of put it on steroids in a way. I mean, it just kind of took it all to another level in that, okay, we've got some of that stuff in place, but let's put a sharper focus on this and really demonstrate how this benefits the state in meaningful ways, tie it to real economic growth and development opportunities. And now Tennessee Promise, for us here at Tennessee Tech and for most four-year campuses, that was a bit of a curveball. I know you like baseball.
I was going to say, well said.
I threw that one in. That was a bit of a curve. Maybe even a slider, because that caught us a little off guard, I think. I mean, we had been competing for students both internally and outside the state in a fairly routine kind of fashion for a long time. We had staff and leadership in enrollment development that was sort of used to that business as usual, and this was a major external disruptor to that. It changed the way students thought about college. It changed the way they made those decisions. It changed the timing of those decisions. It changed what their expectations were in terms of scholarships and return. I mean, it really put the students in a driver's seat to a large extent on what their expectations were for a college experience. And it highlighted to them that they have a lot of options. And so we've had to adjust all that. Most of the four-year campuses, us included, saw a reduction in the size of our freshman classes for at least the first year or two there, and so we've really thought long and hard about how to restructure, how to restaff, how to think about the recruiting process differently, how to scholarship differently,
Mm-hmm.
all of which is positive. I think that I've been a big supporter of Tennessee Promise because I think ultimately students win. You know, regardless of the short-term impact on some of us in this business, you know, we'll adjust and we'll accommodate. Ultimately, the students win in this deal because they got more options and they have more flexibility. So I think the numbers show that about 5% or so more high school graduates are going to post-secondary education now than they were previous to Tennessee Promise. So that's a great thing.
Yeah,
as well.
Going right out of high school. Yeah, and so on campus, you've already said this, so you've adjusted to that. And of course, the Tennessee Promise is, I guess, just the first or second cohort have now come out.
Correct. I think we're in the 4th year of that now. So yeah, we 2014, I guess, was the first year of Tennessee Promise. So now in 2018, this was our largest freshman class since prior to Tennessee Promise. So it's taken a little while to sort of recover, and I think the marketplace is still adjusting to this. Students are still adjusting to these options and trying to decide what's best for them.
Yeah. So kind of a random question, but my sense is there's a. Tell me if this it makes any sense compared to other states. And
Sure.
when you're out in your association meetings and whatever, it would seem that Tennessee actually has an arsenal now of things to work with, statewide initiatives that aren't there in other states. Is that
That's true? Yeah, that's very true. And it's a unique combination of opportunities. I think most states are pretty envious of where Tennessee is currently, and it is a remarkable story actually. You know, I think Tennessee was fortunate in that financially they were able to do this at this time, particularly coming out of the recession years.
Yeah.
Most states were not in that kind of financial position to be able to invest the way Tennessee has, and Tennessee was pretty creative in how they went about it. But the priorities were put in the right place, and I think the results are speaking for themselves.
Yeah. So the most current initiative, let's put it that way,
Sure.
The Focus Act.
Right.
And I know our time is winding down, but if you could talk about, as a president that was in place and went through that, the build up to it, and then now the implementation of the Focus Act, kind of your thoughts and challenges, opportunities.
Well, I know it was not an easy decision for Governor Haslam to make, and I know that previous governors had toyed with ideas around difference in governance structures for higher education in Tennessee, and typically would back away from it because it's not an easy thing to do. Even if you think it's the right thing to do, it's not an easy thing to do. When it was first posed to me, I was actually pretty excited about it because I think I immediately saw the opportunity there. And I wasn't naive to the challenges. Although I will say that now living through, leading one of those locally governed institutions and helping to stand up an independent board of trustees from scratch, it's a challenge. It's not an easy thing to do. I mean, you're asking a group of 8 or 10 people that really have, for the most part, have had little to no experience in higher education to suddenly do a deep dive and swim well from day one. And universities are much more complex institutions and organizations than most people realize. I mean, we have a little bit of everything on a campus. I mean, it's equivalent in many ways to running a small city with all of the complexity of that. But then you add to that you've got customers to satisfy, you've got a product to produce, and it's a unique environment that most people are not readily accustomed to. I mean, they have perceptions. I mean, all of them went to college, so they have some experience in that regard. But it's much more difficult than that. Higher education is probably one of the most highly regulated industries in the country, and most people don't realize that. So there's a lot of restrictions that you have to deal with. But the Focus Act fundamentally changed the conversation, and it allowed these 6 now independent universities to get a lot more help at dealing with their particular issues, concerns, and opportunities than would have ever been done previously. And I think it allowed the community colleges to do likewise.
Sure.
But that's for them to say.
Yeah. So closing question then, from now you're dealing with a local board
Right.
as opposed to a statewide
Sure.
board. You don't have a chancellor between you and your board.
Right.
So how does that change your worldview?
Oh, it makes the president's job much more nuanced and complex. I'd be hard to say that it makes it more difficult. It changes the job. It is a different job. I'm doing a different job now than when I was originally hired under the TBR system. And it's largely because of what you said. Before I was basically dealing with one individual, the chancellor, and his or her staff, to some extent with the Board of Regents, but not a lot of interaction. Now I've got 10 board members that all have unique personalities and interests and concerns, and so I'm juggling all of those as well as managing the campus. In the long run, I think the campus still benefits substantially. I think the benefits far outweigh the downside. But I told, when we went through this transition, I told everybody on campus, we were governed by a board before, we're governed by a board now. As far as the campus is concerned, there's no real fundamental difference in that regard. The only person's life that's going to change is mine, and I've found that to be true.
Yeah, that's a good characterization.
Yeah.
Great. Well, certainly wish you luck with that.
Well, thank
You'll
you.
do well. And I think we have run out of time. So Phil, thanks.
I
so
appreciate
much
it,
for your
Rich.
thoughts. Thanks for being
I appreciate
part
you
of
putting this together. I think this is awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you.